tonight, really, I want to look at our our experience of education and how it shapes our sense of self. And I thought that a question I'd like to pose at the outset of tonight, and it may well be that people want to make some immediate responses, but I suspect you might want to sit with this for a little while, is to just to reflect on your earliest experience of school. This is a funny question, not a funny question to ask, but it's quite a significant question to ask. I can assume that most people listening in tonight or watching tonight, I can make an assumption, a pretty good assumption, that all of them have been to school before. And what I notice is that going to school is an almost universal experience, in the same way all of us are raised in families of some shape or form. Equally, we've all been to school. And I think tonight what I want to look at is how does that experience start to shape us? So, maybe as I'm talking a little now, if people want to just reflect back and think about some of those early memories of school. It's really important just to talk a little bit about the TA idea of scripts, because I'm aware that there'll be some people that are familiar with transactional analysis checking in tonight, and some who might not be familiar with the TA idea of script. So if I just introduce that very briefly,
that'd be great,
and then come back to this school theme. So Eric Berne, who was the key, the founding thinker and writer in transactional analysis, he talked about the script as a plan, an unconscious plan that the individual creates during early childhood, and certainly from around about 3 to 7 years old, this plan, which comprises of decisions and beliefs, starts to form and creates a sense of identity. And it's not just a series of beliefs about who I am, it's about who others are in relation to me and what happens to people like me. The crucial thing, I suppose, in Berne's work around script was that having established that plan, it then is my roadmap for making sense of what comes next. And so Berne talked about how many individuals, if you like, live or experience the world through their script. Berne wasn't the only person to have come up with this idea. He was quite influenced by Alfred Adler as well, who also spoke about something similar. But when I'm talking about it here, I'm talking about it as Berne was describing it. So I don't want to suggest that Berne had a monopoly on this idea, but this was important in his work. And obviously, Berne was a psychotherapist, and he worked with clients with a view to wanting them to change their script or be free from script or develop what he sometimes referred to as cure or autonomy. And so in transactional analysis, the script is a pretty core idea for making sense of why it is that people behave and feel and make sense of the world in the way they do.
It's noticing that experience of someone saying that they're, at the time that their curiosity was heightened, about being shamed right at that moment. Yeah. You have a real reaction, Giles.
I do. I can really. My one was in maths, and I was about 5 years old, and I remember distinctly being asked a question. The class was asked a question, and I knew the answer. And what I did, which just came to me, was I actually sat on my chair in the shape of a number 2. Because I felt that was the answer. And the teacher said, "What are you doing, Giles?" And so I said, look, I'm being number 2. And she told me not to be so stupid. And you can probably sense, it's the sense of shame which people are remarking upon here. And the ingenuity that that person, the person in the French, the ingenuity or the curiosity, which is so heightened, can be so heightened in children, is also it's like so vulnerable as well. and the schooling environment can be crushing around those new shoots. So, and I know from my own experience that from there on in, I have never been any good at maths. Most mass public education systems are based on a particular idea of education, one which might be broadly described as a liberal model of education. And the reason why it was called a liberal model is the idea was, and it was born out of, best part of 150 years ago, it was born out of an idea that people could be freed from ignorance, liberated from ignorance through education, and that essentially people needed to know stuff. And that if people knew stuff, then that would be better for civilization, for society, and so on. And so the liberal model of education has permeated much of our mainstream public maintained systems. And it's that model which underwrites most of our experience in school. And the deal, I'm responding partly here to Alison's comment about power. And the whole thing about power in that liberal model is that the power essentially resides in the teacher. And that the teacher has the knowledge, and if you shut up and sit down quiet enough, at the end of this, you'll have acquired the knowledge, you'll be clever too. But until that point, you're not. And so I'm being quite crude there in order to emphasise what happens relationally in the classroom. And I'm going to suggest that this is the underpinning model. This is the underpinning model for most of our experience of being schooled. It's quite exceptional not to have that. So when it comes then to stepping out as a teacher myself, maybe 10 years later, or when I start to join an adult training experience, maybe learning to be a therapist or what have you, training to be a counsellor, the imprint that we take will not only be specific to our own personal experience of the classroom, but it will also generally be the notion of that liberal model, which is wrapped up in power and what that looks like in relationship. And so some people can really struggle to think of learning that looks anything other than that liberal model. I think next time we meet, I want to look at Parker J. Palmer's work. And I suppose really at the centre of his work is, in order to do this, in order to find the courage that some of us have been talking about admiring, is I think what teachers have to figure out how to do is to no longer teach from the head. So it's not just about teaching to the head, but we have to figure out how do we teach from our heart. And what Palmer, I think, explores beautifully is the integration of soul and role. And I think that's where we find the courage to teach, which is a phrase that he uses. And I think that's where I want to go next time we meet, really, John. He's looking at soul and role, and how do we find a place of groundedness, really.